We're talking about publishing in Asian markets. We've got a range of experience here, looking at across the whole Asian region, and we've got a representative from Russia as well. So what I'd like to start with is getting you all to introduce yourselves, just a sentence or two about your company and what it is that you do, and then we'll launch into some questions after that. So let's start at this end, since Shin's closest as a teacher. Yes, do you want to say something?
Hi, my name's Shintaro, and I run a company called Chorus Worldwide. We publish indie games from the West out into Asia.
I'm Allison, Bilas, and I'm from JoyPac. We're also a local game publisher focused on APAC and primarily China.
Hello everyone, my name is Dmitry. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Zorka.Mobi, which is a creative mobile performance agency. We help game developers to earn more by means of influence marketing and performance-based advertising.
Hi, I'm Holmwood. I run a company called Secret Police, which is a game developer in London, most recently released Stardew Valley on mobile. Also run Marvelous Europe, which is the European arm of the Japanese listed mobile and console game publisher.
Hi, I'm Allison King. I'm working at Huawei, looking after the App Store for the European region, but also interfacing with the Chinese version of Huawei App Store too.
Hi everyone, my name is Landra, and I'm the Director of Corporate Strategy and Planning for Mixi, which is one of the largest mobile gaming companies in Japan.
Great. Thank you very much. So what we'll do is I've got a number of questions that I want to ask you to get a perspective on publishing in Asia. But of course we've got a crowd here who have been here through the afternoon listening to the various talks. So if anyone does have any questions at any point, I'll leave some room at the end for questions, but please do put your hand up if you want to chip in on a topic or ask a specific question. We'll take questions as we go, okay? So we'll do that. So let's start right off. Allison, we were speaking before, and this was maybe a way to launch in. So why are the Asian markets, Asia Pacific and China, so hot for mobile gaming right now? Why is everyone in the games industry so excited about these territories?
Sure. I think a lot of people have touched on it, like you said, but it's largely around scale and the size of the markets over there. And Miley before was talking about median incomes rising in all of these regions. China has had a huge growth in median income, so they have money and time more and more. And of course, there's just so many people there, so it's untapped in that way.
Great, and anyone else who wants to chip in? Is that your experience too? Is there anything?
Yeah, I want to add that according to the latest news report, 28% of all games revenue came from Chinese players, and at the same time, the whole Asia Pacific region generated 52% of global games revenue. So here's the answer.
Yeah, and I'd just add that, particularly in terms of mobile, some of the business models that we use here, free-to-play and gacha and loot boxes and all of that kind of stuff, that originated in Asia a long time ago. So those markets are kind of more mature, and the audience can be more accepting and more mass market in terms of taking on board different methods of payment from just standard premium games.
Right. So we're talking about Asia, but that's a huge place. that's almost too big for one panel. China's not the same market as Japan, and we had some interesting talks earlier on about Korea. But from your experience, let's talk. Maybe we'll start with Shin with Japan. How do we characterise the different territories? What do all these territories? How do they differ, mate? Can we kind of try and identify some of those things?
Okay, well, I guess you're right about China, Japan, and Korea being very different. I remember this time last year looking at the top 20 top grossing in China, Japan, and Korea, and I think of those 60 slots, there were only maybe 3 games that were in all 3. Whereas if you look at Europe, if you look at the US, there's a lot more homogeneity across those. I think Japan has got such a background in console gaming, arguably kind of invented it for the modern era from Nintendo. So a lot of the gaming comes from that. I think what's Lenj is probably far more in a better position to talk about this than me, but I think it's, especially on mobile, it's reverted to what Japanese gamers have grown up with, RPGs particularly. So that's really come to the forefront. I think Korea, its background was in the bangs, the PC bangs, the competitive gaming on PC. So you see a lot of competitive PvP gaming. China's the one, I think China's not hybrid, but China has as much online, but it's still, as big as it is, to me it feels like it's still growing. And so PUBG is as successful as a Three Kingdoms game. Culturally very, very different games, but they're all, it's still, I wouldn't say blue oceans, it's nowhere close to that, but it's still evolving from my point of view. It's not, because they don't have as much of a background of gaming from the 80s or 90s, I think they're still trying to find their feet. What is the best thing for China game?
Right. And is that someone else, maybe Shipping with some sector there? You mentioned language. What's your perspective on that? How do we characterise the different needs of the different territories?
Well, I think from the Japan perspective, I'm sure that I think a lot of people think of Asia as just one market, and it's a huge misconception that you shouldn't have. And I think that Japan is a very unique market in the sense where it's one of the highest ARPPU markets, highest average revenue per player spend markets in Asia, and very loyal fan base as well. But the content that they enjoy is very niche and unique compared to the South Korean and Chinese markets. So I would say that it's very different strategies, and like I said, it would take a long time just to try to cover as many topics about three markets in East Asia. But very different for sure. Yeah.
Actually, maybe that's Harry. So you work your business there. You work with a Chinese publisher. Do you work in any other markets in Asia, or is it just the one you spoke about?
Well, so Marvelous is a Japanese publisher.
Right.
But yeah, we Secret Police is also working with Tencent in China, for example.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, just to kind of reiterate what everyone else has said, I mean, I kind of view there as being four games markets. There's China, there's Japan, there's Korea, and there's everywhere else. That's how not similar they are. There's much more in common with USA and Russia than there is with China and Korea, I would say.
Right. So let's talk about something that was unavoidable. We spoke about it earlier on. Actually, I think it was Jeff from my Views Guy who first brought it up this afternoon. One of the big things, of course, last year was the freeze in China, the big freeze and the impact that had, the non-issuing of ISBNs and so on. Can we talk a little bit about that? And at the end of the year, China said that they'd allow games to be published again. Is it possible to maybe for us to discuss amongst ourselves and estimate how much of an impact China's policy last year had on the global games market? Perhaps for people who aren't so knowledgeable about what happened, can we get a bit of an overview of the impact of that? You have the mic, Harry, do you want to start, or we can...
Sure. Well, I mean, just on our own case, so we released Stardew Valley on iOS a couple of months ago. It's in the process of being approved for China. We don't really know when it's going to come out of that. We know it will come out of that eventually, but it certainly impacts your planning. And I think for Marvelous, we've had games that we've released on Steam, which surprised us by being huge in China, which we kind of didn't expect. But my view on it is, certainly at the moment, we have to view anything in the Chinese market as just gravy on top of our core business, because it could be switched off like that. And so I don't think it would be a wise strategy for a Western company to kind of make the Chinese market a core part of their business, just view it as a wonderful addition when it happens.
Right. And Allison, but however, Huawei, that's a...
Well, interestingly enough,
exactly.
With Huawei, the way we approach it from our operational perspective is China is a completely separate entity. So we have a separate team that deals with Chinese developers and publishers. They have their own content mix and selection, and then everywhere else, the overseas territories, that's basically controlled by Asia Pacific team, European team, Latin American team, etc. So with that in mind, you can say that Korea is completely separate to China and Japan as well, and we approach it in a very different way too. So yeah, it's important as a developer from a developer perspective to get an understanding of how your game will work in China, first of all. Talk to experts, maybe even run tests, look at comparative games that are out there, because let's face it, there's a lot of similar games out there, and see how it's going. And it's probably worth investing into a localization strategy with an expert partner to make sure that the nuances that you need to have success are all evident and there before you launch.
Right. With the Chinese market opening up against games, or they're starting to issue licenses, my understanding from what we've been saying is that it'll be Chinese publishing the Chinese publishing games, and they'll be dealing with the backlog first, and it'll be Chinese games again.
Yes, I mean, I heard today, and I'm sure everybody's heard a different story potentially, but I heard it could be 2 years if you have your game in the backlog waiting. It could take 2 years to get through that whole backlog until they can start to issue licenses again. So that sounds like a pretty gloomy prediction, to be honest. And knowing the way that China works, they'll just throw a hell of a lot of people onto it and probably push that backlog through. And you'll see that it's actually not quite 2 years. But having said that, you need to plan for these kind of delays. Like Harry was mentioning before, you can't get all your eggs in that basket because it could be an arbitrary decision that just completely screws your plans up that you can't plan for.
I don't think it'll be a 2-year backlog, but I estimated, I think it was like 6,000 games did not get a license last year because there were only about 2,000 that went through. Typically there's around 8,000 games that are licensed per year. So, but I think companies adjusted their strategies and didn't necessarily, like they're not sitting there waiting on a game to be licensed. Like you were saying, it's kind of like you can't plan around that as a business, so you move on. So we're really hoping it doesn't take 2 years. We're also in that queue with a few of our games, but expect it to be a lot faster.
So we estimate 6,000 games in the backlog of potential amount of time. If people are here at PocketGamer Connect right now developing games and thinking they might want to publish in China, is our advice to them forget about it?
Definitely not from JoyPac, yeah. I mean,
what should they be thinking? How should they be approaching that then?
Coming to China in particular, I mean, talking to a local partner, I think is really key there in China. You've heard it from a few people today. But start exploring the market maybe on iOS and tapping into Android from there. I think is a good strategy for mobile anyway, getting some exposure.
Great. Would everyone else agree with that? Is that basically the strategy that everyone should be having?
Yeah, I mean totally. You can't underestimate 1.5 billion people. It's such a ridiculously large. Now I remember a couple of years ago being at some UK event meeting a bunch of Chinese companies, and there was a young guy there who I think he was a streamer or he ran a games reviewing website, and I just got chatting and I said, is it popular one? He said, it's fairly popular, about 250 million viewers. and that's half the size of the entire European Union watching one guy's website. And so it just puts into perspective how vast it is and how there's no way you can turn yourself away from that kind of opportunity.
Right.
If I can offer like a different perspective, some advice I could give to people is to look at Japan. Right, even though yes, it might be an interesting market as well, where you need to find specific partners to get in the market. I think it's more democratized there than it is in. Maybe that's a better word to use. It's better there in Japan than it is in China. One of the you can expect a lot of competition in China, and I think we felt a little bit of the pressure too when those licenses were kind of stopped because. There were a lot of Chinese influence in the games that were coming into Japan as well. So there was a huge influx of Chinese money coming into Japanese companies, local Japanese companies, and there were a lot more Chinese-made games on the Japanese app stores just because they needed to get out of China for Chinese companies there. So there was a lot of pressure back then, and we were actually kind of glad that the pressure kind of eased a little bit off now, and so the bigger companies that are focusing back in China again. But just to share, I think Japan is still a very interesting market to look at from if you want to enter the Asian market for sure. Yeah.
Shin, you one of the things that you do is you help companies, Western companies, publish in Japan.
That's right.
That's what you do. So what is it that what do developers in the West need that you provide? What do they need in order to enter?
I mean, the table stakes, the most basic one is obviously localization, and having someone do localization that understands it and is using a native language translator, and that's the basic one. But after that, obviously, it's promotional work and making sure that if you have a premium game, you might want to think about another way of monetizing it. So the example that we have is we published The Room and The Room 2, which were premium games in the West, and we just made it so that they were free to download, and then after the first chapter, you kind of buy.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so just because Asia had already moved to free, I think, before the West had completely. And this is one place, I think, where you can use the term Asia, because Japan, China, Korea, all have gone free first. anything with a price point people just weren't bothering to click on. So we made those games free at the point of download, and then people monetize up to buy the full game. And so that was just something that we, I guess, had an understanding of, and we said, look, we think we need to do this to make the game successful. So I guess that's kind of monetization and culturalization, to use two horrible buzzwords together. And so that PR support, and we now do more stuff with console as well, so the Switch. And they're having that relationship with Nintendo in Japan obviously makes a big difference as well. So all of that kind of stuff.
Right. In fact, you raised two things there that I think are interesting, both monetization and localization. Of course, as I said before, if anyone has any questions at any point, feel free to chip in, and of course anyone on the panel as well. But maybe I think if I perhaps go to Anderson, localization, publishing, maybe taking a Western game and publishing it in China or wherever it might be. Is it simply a matter of translation, or is there, what do you have to say?
Definitely not. And you could say the localization between Japan, Korea, and China are all very different as well. They're very nuanced and very ancient cultures that develop their kind of tastes over long periods of time, and you have to be very aware of that when you're actually making the game appropriate for those markets. So I think it's very important to team up with experts for those particular markets that you're targeting. I know NetEase is great in China. They're a great company, and they've had some great track record of taking Western games and pushing and having success in China. Do your due diligence when it comes to the partners that you're looking at. I've heard a lot of stories of companies being burnt by developers who actually basically rip their game off and clone it, and then it's quite a common refrain. I'm sure people have heard that before. So these stories are not necessarily urban myths. If you just spend the time talking to your colleagues at events like this, you'll start to get a pretty good picture of who the people are trustable and who aren't. I think, as you were saying before as well, it might even be worth considering the Japanese market before China, because China is difficult, but it offers a lot of reward if you succeed there. The Japanese market, on the other hand, is probably a slightly more premium market, and you can probably get away with not less localization, but Western themes perhaps is an easy thing to say, and maybe more acceptable there. So,
okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so potentially like something like baseball, for example, is huge in Japan, and it's essentially an American sport, right?
Yeah.
So things like that, there's small little bits and pieces that you could probably latch onto, but it's worth doing your homework.
Absolutely, I think that on that kind of culturalization thing, it's interesting that things that sometimes you take for granted. We've got a panel coming up about the Middle East actually, which is a different area, but I was on a panel on that subject not long ago when we were talking about translation of games into the Middle Eastern market, and one of the things that they pointed out was, I would probably remove Crusader characters from the game, and I think sometimes you have to be a little bit aware maybe of the regional background of this. Monetization though, you mentioned that, and we spoke a little bit about the premium versus the premium. What is the most common then? You mentioned, I think it's that it's still maybe there's used to free games in Asia. Is there a market for premium though still? Anyone want to weigh in on that? Sorry.
Well, I mean, Square Enix is still doing pretty good business, and in some cases, Square Enix have the most expensive games available on the app stores, right? And that's premium, so they're a great Japanese publishing house. So, yeah, there's definitely a market for sure. It just depends on your product. You need to have, if you're going to sell a premium product, it needs to be a premium product. It can't just be a free-to-play product that's turned into premium, right? You need to consider the value for the end user. I think people who install free-to-play games are aware of what they're buying into, even though they're not buying anything. But they're probably aware that it makes sense to click a few ads, pay every now and again because you're enjoying grinding through the game. But in Japan especially, I think premium games work pretty well. When I previously worked at Sony, we found that promoting premium content in our on-device channels was very good in Japan as well.
Right.
For example, Us 2's game, Monument Valley, did very well in Japan.
Right, that's interesting. And Allison, is that your experience as well at JoyPac, the different monetization models? Is premium still very popular in your experience as well?
Yeah, I think there's room for all business models, if you will. JoyPac in particular, we focus on ad monetization. We think that's up and coming in China. It's pretty well established on iOS in terms are right now, and then Android, we feel like will consolidate at some point in the future. It's very fragmented channel distribution over there, and they all have different ad monetization. But we are kind of seeing some trends, at least people are talking about that coming together, so I think there's some potential there in the future.
Right.
I think Japan is on mobile. Premium is the opportunity for Western games more so than free-to-play, partly because free-to-play is so resource-intensive, and persuading a Japanese game publisher that it should adopt your free-to-play games is not an easy thing to do. But if you look at the free-to-play chart on iOS or Android in Japan, it's all Japanese games or possibly some Chinese games. If you look at the premium chart, number one is always Minecraft, Plague Inc.'s always in there, sometimes Stardew Valley is in there, it's our second biggest territory after the US. So yeah, so it does seem like, I don't know if it's just because Japanese developers aren't making those games, or that the people that are, the small subset of the population that will buy a premium game instead of trying a free-to-play game are more open to Western game experiences. I don't know what it is, but it does seem that premium market is there.
Right, interesting. Before we move on, I've got a question about trends for next year, but before we move on, I wanted just to ask, Lanya, I realised that you kind of do rarely do third-party publishing, but you actually co-develop projects from initial stages. Is that a common model? I mean, how do you work with developers that's unique to you guys?
So I think for our models a little bit different, primarily because as a company we believe in the philosophy of face-to-face gameplay and the idea of actually bringing friends and family closer together as opposed to just games that just entertain, right? So we think there's a purpose behind why we make the games that we make. And just to share a little bit more, the key philosophy is kind of encapsulated behind this idea of barbecue. And this is something that our CEO has actually mentioned over and over again, that every single marketing activation or product that we do, and when the user kind of interfaces with the product, it needs to give you the same feeling like you're having with a barbecue, when you're having a barbecue with friends and family. Right? So it kind of encapsulates the entire essence of what we do as a company very easily with this word barbecue. And it's very hard to create these kind of experiences through games that we just publish when we publish wholesale, right? And as a countermeasure to this, we decided that it will make a lot more sense to co-develop games from scratch with the barbecue model in mind, as opposed to just looking at games that may have the barbecue model and try to adapt that game into the market. Hence this, we call it the 0 to 1 strategy as opposed to 1 to 10 being like publishing. So we think the 0 to 1 strategy is much easier with this philosophy in mind. Hence, this kind of thinking. If I were to extrapolate this and share, if any other Japanese game companies are doing pretty similar things, I would say that there are not many Japanese game companies that will do wholesale third-party publishing. All game companies at least, because they have very specific needs in mind of what they want the games to be. And I think just for us in Mixi, we have a very clear idea of what the game needs to be, hence we think that coming in at the early stages will make a lot more sense. Yeah, so that's essentially how we think about publishing. That's all.
Great. Thank you. So actually, I'd like to maybe turn to Allison first to talk about this question, because a talk from your colleague earlier at JoyPac was about hyper-casual. So are we able to say what games or types of games are going to dominate in the various Asian territories in the coming year? If we look ahead to 2019, in the West last year, everyone was talking about Battle Royale, for instance, as a trend. But what are the big genres for next year? Is hyper-casual the only game in town? What do you think?
We're betting on hyper-casual, for sure. Becoming, again, more and more viable because of the advertising market over there, both for buying users and for monetizing them. And we see hyper-casual games kind of popping up in the charts as well. So we're very bullish, if you will, on those types of games. Again, it's a huge market, and players are really looking towards the West for trends like that. And they're looking for creativity and kind of different things than they've had before. So we think that hyper-casual is definitely coming, and the market conditions are right for that to be feasible over there.
Okay. Well, I'd like to get sort of a sense of everyone else's experience. Then, Dmitry, you've helped a lot of Asian companies promote in Russia and in the West. What's your sense of what other big genres are at the moment?
So yeah, the thing is that hyper casual is a trend, and as you said, battle royale was the most trendy thing for Western countries last year. So, but it's a bit different in Russia. So the most trendy genres were match 3, strategy, and puzzle games respectively. So these are the insights provided by mail.ru. And yeah, as for the trends, I think hyper casual will explode a lot globally. Yeah.
Yeah. The rest of the panel. What do you, let's start at this end and look down. Shin, what trends are you observing?
No idea. Honestly, and again, I think it comes down to which country you're talking about.
Right.
But I don't think the hyper-casual games that we see in the West are particularly going to break. Certainly in Japan, which is the market I know the best. I think it'll just, it's retrenching, in a good way, to hardcore JRPG, that's right, and different variations thereof. So I think that will continue.
Is there room for like indie development or indie developers to come to Japan? Because one thing I've heard is that. But I've heard, what's the reason for that in particular? Maybe you could continue.
Sorry, what's the reason he's going to Asia or Japan? I think there's actually a big opportunity for Western indies because there aren't that many Japanese indies. So most Japanese developers prefer to stay in large companies. So you see very few people actually splintering off and forming even 5-person teams, 10-person teams. A friend of mine has a company called a game called Dragonfang, but he's one of the few guys with a 15-person team size that's actually doing well in mobile. But you just don't see that many. So I think, for people that don't want, Monster Strike, which is a great game, or Puzzle Dragons, or any of those kind of massive games, they want something different. They don't have much choice but to look for Western games, because there are no Japanese games. The ideal would be, for the market, the ideal would be Japanese developers making indie games because they share the same culture and they can bring that to bear. But no one's doing that. Yeah.
What about any other trends that people have panel observed? Do you agree? Is it hyper casual? Is it?
I mean, just sort of off the top of my head, I haven't really thought about this before, but one of the things that interested me in the first place about the Japanese mobile market was that the monetization was through the roof. When you look at a Monster Strike, and there is no Western developer in the world that would not kill their mothers to get the kind of numbers that Monster Strike makes on an up-down basis. And so in that sense, hyper-casual is terrifying for Japan, I should imagine. The idea that lots and lots of people will be playing games that really hardly monetize at all or make a few cents up-down instead of a few dollars up-down, which you might expect to see on a super high-end Japanese game. So I would imagine that the Japanese companies would really not want that to happen. Japan has been this market that works incredibly well and incredibly better than everywhere else, I think because of just users' propensity to spend was just really strong. So yeah, not that I'm particularly involved in the Japanese market, but I would imagine that the hyper-casual is a bad thing for that.
Not that I would predict any trends, and if I could, I should get into stockbroking or something.
Right.
I would just, some statistics I heard from the Chinese Huawei app gallery is that about 51% of the revenue in games in that gallery is from RPG titles in China. So massively multiplayer RPGs and other styles of RPGs are still doing very well there. I think if you wanted to launch an RPG in those territories, though, you'd be quite cautious because there's so much competition. But they're still monetized very, very well. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what really booms this year.
Yeah, I think we don't really identify follow trends so much, we create them so much from our point of view. But my job is essentially to kind of predict the future, so to speak, right? As a strategy guy. And these are some of the key thoughts that we have in the company so far. I think the first one is we don't really think of it in terms of genres. We think of trends as experiences, right? So what kind of experiences are going to come in the future. And we think that, and you know, this is pretty much quite predictable to some, that hyper-casual is great, but the idea of social hyper-casual is going to be something that we think is going to be next in line, right? So you have the single-player asynchronous experiences, but you know, in due time you're going to have more social aspects of those asynchronous hyper-casual experiences. So we think that's definitely going to come for sure. We also think that users become very demanding of the social experiences that they have. So what that means is that for free-to-play games that are currently in the Japanese market, we think that people require a high level of social than expected right now. So instead of just co-op multiplayer or like, you know, face-to-face multiplayer, they require, I would say, a lot more in-game incentives for people to gather together to play, right? So you can definitely see this kind of trend happening from Fortnite or NetEase Nights, for that matter. They do quite well in Japan. So you know, we think there's a high level of engagement or requirement for that level of social. I think the last point I want to make with regards to indie is that, especially for Asian markets, and I think more so for Japan than any other market, is that in terms of the size of the companies, it's usually the mid-sized companies that squeeze the most, right? So if you want to survive in a mobile game space, you either go indie, where the cost is low, but you can get relatively good exposure from being indie, or you go all the way where you're like Monster Strike or Mixi, where you can put money and resources behind big titles, and you know, you're able to fail. Right, so you know, titles now these days like cost about $3 million to $10 million to develop over a period of 1.5 to 2 years. Right, that's way too long for a free-to-play game title. But if you don't have the resources and all the time to be able to do that, you should go all the way to indie. Right, so you can see a lot of mid-sized Japanese companies being squeezed out into either, you know, non-existent or, you know, forced to actually innovate and go big. Right, that's how actually Mixi kind of survived in the first place, right? So this is something I'm kind of taking on. I think indie will definitely do very well for sure in Japan. Yeah.
I think something that we haven't mentioned is potentially mixed reality. As the devices are getting much more powerful, the chipsets, the graphical, there's obviously 5G networks as well are coming in. You'll see Asia will be leading the world in 5G rollout. So potentially some kind of mixed reality type game, which would go well for Mixi, because you've got Mixi in there.
Yeah, but the thing is, like right now we're still talking about holding the devices like that, right? Like it's very hard. I find it hard pressed to find an environment where I would want to play a game just holding my device out there and looking. I think, you know, it's great for like, you know, measuring, or you know, it's great for having at least throwing one Pokeball, right? I don't foresee me like going around, you know, playing, catching, you know, things for long periods of time or holding the phone like that. So I think from a user experience standpoint, we are still a little bit bearish, but we shall see. Yeah.
Well, incredibly, we've gone very, very quickly through the panel. We're almost at the end, so I didn't say that I'd make some time for questions from the audience. So while we have these 6 experts here, does anyone in the crowd have a question about publishing in Asia? One right here straight away, thank you.
In terms of the market demographics, is it very diverse? So like the gender split and the age, does it tend to be quite diverse?
Who wants to take that one?
I want to say yes, but again, with a market like China, from my perspective, being so big, it's like everybody is playing. If you're on the subway there, you see old ladies playing games on their phone in a 10-cent, WeChat mini games, things like that, and it's wild. And just growing and growing over there. So when we're talking about some of the, like what genres will be up and coming there, it's almost less so about breaking in and competing with the existing, but taking advantage of what's growing over there and the audience growing and growing along with it.
So for Japan, I would say the high school students. So obviously, if you look at maybe let's say from 12 to 16, this is for video games and mobile games. I would say those are the best demographics that you can look at. those will bring in the most amount of daily active users, but they will not pay into the game, so you have very low average spend. But when you look at the demographics of 30 and above, so salarymen and beyond, so those are the highest paying users, and this is true for all the games and top grossing games for mobile in Japan. So you see a lot of high spending users that will be willing to spend more than $100 or more per month on your game, but will have very little users in that. So high ARPPU, low DAU for the Japan market. I can't really speak to South Korea or China, so if anybody has any words on that, that'd be great.
Any other insight into demographics, or should we take another question from the crowd? Any more? Any other questions for our expert panel? I'll throw a question your way while we wait for. We mentioned it briefly earlier this afternoon, but is piracy or a variant of that kind of the chance of being ripped off by a copycat? Are these big considerations for companies that are unused to dealing with Asian companies? Should people here be thinking about those issues, and what should they be doing? This is the how-to panel. How should people be protecting themselves?
I think in terms of China, there's only a couple of things you can do. I mean, if you put out a game on Android today, it will be out on 100 stores in China tomorrow. But if you're working with a really strong partner, there's no way that we can take action against someone who's infringing our IP in China. But if you're working with a partner, then that's obviously a great way for them to be able to defend it. And the other thing you can do is obviously not put your game in Chinese. Assuming you're not running a multiplayer game, so it is a game that's entirely piratable. Just don't put Chinese in it until you're ready to launch in China. There's not a lot more you can do, but it's a huge issue.
Any other questions from the crowd? And I think the time being what it is, we'll probably wrap it up there. I'd like to give a big thanks, please, to our panel, Shintaro, Allison, Dmitry, Harry, Allison, and Langa. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us.